Hi there. In this video, I'm going to talk about an issue which is now openly acknowledged to be something devastating major TV shows across the past 12 months and more. The long gaps between major TV seasons on all the streaming platforms. It is now commonplace to have 2-year gaps between TV shows. This isn't sustainable, it isn't working. So in this video, I'm going to go over why was this happening, and why even the studios now acknowledge they can't keep doing that, and it's going to stop. Now, I just wrapped up a series of behind-the-scenes videos on state-of-the-industry things affecting HBO's parent company, Warner Discovery, and how that affected specifically House of the Dragon Season 2. But I try to put that in the broader context of industry-wide problems. At the time, people were yelling at House of the Dragon, it's a 2-year wait, but ever since then, this affected so many other shows. I hope by now people realize it was a trend. It's because there wasn't that much TV on in early 2024 because of the ripple effect of the writer's strike. Think about it, there was a dry spell there, so most major shows started up again summer through fall of 24, through the normal TV cycle of fall to spring. Then through the spring shows we got, like The Last of Us Season 2, was devastated just out of the gate. Regardless of writing, the premiere was down a third viewership from what it was at the finale, because it was 2 years ago. Andor was okay, but it wasn't as good as they thought it would be because, losing momentum. Other shows beyond that, it's not just the top shows, it's everything, is affected by these 2-year gaps. And the weirdest part is that it was just presented as normal, that at shows of this scale we need to do that. That isn't why they were doing it at all. This video is my penance, my atonement hopefully, because at the time I thought they needed to have gaps that long for a show of this size. They really didn't. And I'm really angry about that, so this is me admitting why even they are now saying they couldn't do that. And it isn't just my speculation. This video is based on 2 really good news articles assessing this in Vulture and Ringer at the end of 2024, explaining all of the problems with why the heck are there 2-year gaps now. So I'll link those below. I'm just summarizing what they said. There are 3 major reasons. The first is just production scale is bigger. That when the streaming boom started in 2019, everyone wanted their flagship, their Game of Thrones. So they did make a lot of shows which were on a giant scale, unprecedented. House of the Dragon has a bigger budget, relatively, than Game of Thrones did. I think they spend the money better because it's not as wasteful, and we've heard good reports from that, but fact remains that I think they were able to do more with more money, but it costs $20 million an episode. Game of Thrones at its height was like $15 million in Season 6, battle episodes. Lord of the Rings is even worse, where one season production cost alone is $250 million. And it's not even getting to the other crazy flagships that failed, like Paramount had a $150 million Halo TV series. Just the scale of these things is massive. Even Andor took 2 years because they worked it out that across 24 episodes, the average price per episode was $27 million. That when you make movie quality stuff, it takes longer. I get that. But a full 2 years? Nor does that explain the actual time scale of filming. That in and of itself, that isn't, I don't expect it for a thing of this size. I mean, I expect it to be like every year and a half at most, but 2 years is no, this is a line that's been crossed. Second point is the VFX crunch, which I split off into a separate video to talk about, because it was in the news that the Avengers movies were delayed because of that. And someone asked, why are you covering this? I split it off from this video in advance. But I talk about that more with unions and stuff, but long story short, because of that overexpansion, it particularly hurt the VFX industry, because they overexpanded beyond the capacity of their infrastructure really fast. Everyone wanted more CGI to make the flashier show. And on top of that, unlike writers and directors who are already strained, the VFX industry is, it's a gig economy. They don't have unions. They're third-party contractors. Worked them like rented mules. Eventually they hit critical and it collapsed. House of the Dragon was never specifically a problem with that. They usually stayed within their VFX budget, but the fact remains that the VFX studios are handling more than one studio at a time, more than one thing. They're doing Disney work, they're doing Warner work. This is why post-production takes so much longer. That House of the Dragon would film from, spring. It is a long film. It is from April through October. But during its production cycle, during the peak of Game of Thrones through, first 6 seasons, they would film from July through November or December, have VFX post-production done in 4 months in time for a spring release. It would air until June, and we'd only have a month between, content of some kind. Then we'd have filming reports coming in through July again. Not that everyone looks at the filming reports we do, but why is there just a fallow time between filming periods? That is the core reason for all of this. Those first 2, I understand that, but even if you factor in, well, House of the Dragon has a lot more VFX than Game of Thrones did at its height. Okay, if you stopped filming in fall of 2023, why is it taking all the way to summer with that? Filming-wise, this is point 3. They're only even filming every other year. Why aren't they filming during the post-production on the last season? They filmed Season 1 in 2021. They filmed Season 2, 2023. What was physically happening in 2022 and 2024? And the whole point is this breaks down this isn't even happening with the big shows. This is happening with shows that do not have a large-scale or CGI budget. An example I saw recently, just because it just got renewed, was on Netflix. One of their top 5 shows is that Ginny and Georgia, mother-daughter tragic comedy show. Or like Wednesday, they have to build a lot of sets, but it's not like a Game of Thrones style giant action epic. Why are so many shows coming out 2 years apart, even that aren't nearly at that scale? The core reason, this overshadows, the post-production VFX crunch is nothing compared to this. The scale is nothing compared to this. Since the streaming boom began, all of these new streamers were convinced to copy what Netflix is doing, which is wait until after a season has aired to renew it. Because we have to wait to see the streaming data, the streaming analytics. When the entire point on Game of Thrones was when you're watching Season 6 in spring, that's the whole first half of the year is when they were writing the next season. So, Season 5, if they're making, Season 3 is airing, you're watching The Red Wedding, and they'd even point this out, and people went, oh, did you change this because of something that was a fan reaction to Season 3? And they said, or a character who was missing, and that suddenly came back, and they said, we had already written Season 4 when the Season 3 finale aired, because it had to be done in time, because the finale aired in, May to June. Filming started in July, that the turnaround time, that you have already renewed for Season 5 when you're airing Season 3. They don't do that anymore. They prioritized having the streaming data as more valuable than that. And the point of this video is, thankfully, there is hope, because all of the other studios that initially were copying what Netflix was doing realized this is a terrible business model that has destroyed audience momentum. Netflix doesn't care, because they don't see it that way. Okay, the big new section here is, I realized that there's 2 halves to this, on the local scale and the bigger scale, the micro and macro scales. That on the small scale, how Netflix handles episodic releases within a season. They use the binge model instead of the weekly episode model. Really linked to an extension of that mentality is how they release multiple seasons a full 2 years apart. Both are because they value streaming analytics more than anything. They don't need marketing. They go, you have to wait for not just the live analytics. I mean, the post 30-day, many cases post 90-day viewership data to fuel the algorithm is more important. The binge model already failed, so let's start with that, because it's really just an extension of that. That Netflix's idea, because of the novelty of it, was we're going to binge drop a full season's worth of episodes on the same day. What all the other ones, when they, like Warner and Disney, started up their streamers, they realized that doesn't really help build up buzz about a show in the news media, or not word of mouth. That both in reviewers hyping it up and really liking it in Variety and Deadline, New York Times, whatever, or just trending, going viral on social media. They measure that too, across Twitter and Instagram or whatever. That you need that to build up for a show. Netflix doesn't see it that way because they go that we have perfected the algorithm. The sacred, infallible algorithm. Their entire marketing strategy is their suggested videos feed. That we don't need marketing or to build up momentum on a show in the news, reviews, social media. That the suggested videos feed is supposed to match a content to you so perfectly that it matches it to the type of person who's addicted to that. Like when they got the German sci-fi series Dark, that was a big one, right? Why would we need to market that when our streaming analytics show that it's really popular with people who like Stranger Things, another sci-fi fantasy show, dark fantasy? So the idea is that the algorithm will feed Dark into the suggested videos feed of everyone who watches Stranger Things, and it'll be more important to have the data telling you that than to keep it out at a regular episodic schedule, building up word of mouth or with reviewers. Where that falls apart is how the hell is that supposed to reach people who don't already use Netflix? This is a mentality from back when they were the only big streamer in town, and they still are the juggernaut now that they recovered from that subscriber dip. Once you reach a certain scale, you can afford to not really have marketing anymore, and just, the algorithm will suggest it to people. Everyone else who's trying to build up their streamers understands we need to put out The Mandalorian one episode at a time from the beginning, that Andor Season 1 was one episode at a time, and I remember this critical point around episodes 4 to 5 with the Aldani arc, where it was really building up word of mouth. And that's when I started jumping in, I caught up on it. That House of the Dragon needed to build up word of mouth across Season 1, and Season 1 was very well received ratings-wise. So everyone else has stopped using the binge model. Netflix still insists on it because, the streaming analytics are our god. So the case in point I use is Amazon. The Boys Season 1, when it came out in 2019, used the Netflix binge model. Season 2 in 2020 didn't. They stopped doing that. They realized it doesn't work. And now and again, they will binge drop things like Fallout Season 1. They said this is so narrativized that we're worried people would lose interest, so we want them to get to the middle of the season. Those are exceptional. Barring exceptional cases, like a miniseries, everyone else has stepped away from that. Disney and HBO Max never even tried to use the binge model. What's happening with TV seasons is just the larger scale, macro scale extension of that mentality. That in order to have annual TV shows that come out every spring, it's actually a 9-month gap from the finale to the next premiere, but like clockwork, I'm snap my fingers here, that every spring, same time of year, the same show, you need to have already renewed and already finished writing Season 2 by the time Season 1 airs. Netflix insists you have to wait until 90 days after premiere, after the finale, to judge the data of whether it's worth it. And what about audience momentum? Their thing is, it'll match so perfectly to the type of person who likes that show that they won't care that it's been 2 years. Then again, they might not even make that justification at all, because if you think about it, Netflix started out as a movie rental service. What's the big complaint about Netflix? Barring a handful of top shows, they almost universally cancel projects after 3 seasons. They hate long-form content. Because it's all about the suggested videos feed. That on a whim, are you going to start The Sopranos, a 7-season show that you haven't seen before? Or Game of Thrones? Or for international content, I know there's like more than one adaptation of Romance of the Three Kingdoms from China, which is like their Game of Thrones, this 3-way century-long civil war. There's multiple TV adaptations that are like in the 7 to 10 season range. If that popped up, oh, you like The Witcher, you like Wheel of Time, House of the Dragon, this is also a medieval epic like Shogun or something, it's 10 seasons long, are you just going to start that on a whim? It's a major time investment. That this algorithm mentality was meant for movies, that they're one-shots, that you watched one movie, here's similar movies. So you don't need to worry about turnaround time when you're a movie rental service. And it's why they like shorter TV shows that only run up to 3 seasons. People are more likely to catch it. It is a system built for suggesting new shows rather than building up one mega franchise on a scale of 5 to 7 seasons. It just doesn't fit. And after the problems of the past year, because when shows started up again after the strike, summer 2024, we've had all these problems from House of the Dragon through The Last of Us lost a third of its viewership just at the premiere. Thankfully, even the other studios are realizing, just as we never really copied Netflix's binge model, it is absurd that we copied their model of we have to wait for the streaming data to see if we renew it or not. You need to, the phrase is batch renewal. They need to renew for at least 2 seasons in a row. And yeah, you might end up canceling the second one, but just as if you binge drop everything one day, you lose audience momentum. If you release it 2 seasons apart, you lose audience momentum. Both of those were happening for the same reason, just at different scales. Which is Netflix trusts the algorithm to handle marketing for it, and the other ones realize that isn't a good idea, particularly for franchises. So we are seeing some real progress on this in these Vulture and Ringer articles. That also a separate article, which was earlier than that, talking with HBO's head of drama, Francesca Orsi. But she was also talking in these that they are not just murmuring about this, they are openly saying we need to move back to annual releases by batch renewal. What was that big show of the spring, which was it was set in an emergency room like an ER, they call it The Pit, starring Noah Whiteley, that the Pit show, the medical drama, they openly said, our goal is this is a relatively easy to produce, not giant scale medieval epic, which we are going to batch renew to come out annually every spring. This is part of the new model going back to what works. That's real progress. More importantly, in a separate interview, Francesca Orsi openly said, we are hoping to batch renew A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. The second Game of Thrones spin-off, the Dunk and Egg one. They are planning to film seasons 2 and 3 back-to-back. And it's a short show, it's 6 episodes, it's smaller scale, so you could film season 2 in spring, then season 3 in fall, because it's really 12 episodes overall. I can see them doing it in one sitting, but back-to-back is the phrase they used. That's a second reason why I think they delayed Dunk and Egg from this fall to the coming spring. Apart from that, spring is going to have this big European launch for their streaming platform. That's good business sense to make it the flagship of that. I think a second reason is they looked at the production schedule on long-term, 5 years, and said season 2 will be done at best in spring of 2027. And then the following spring of 28 would be season 3. I think they wanted to synchronize it. That long-term, they said it makes more sense to have that like clockwork premiere, same time every year, annual rate. So it just makes so much more sense if we put season 1 out in spring of 26, season 2 spring 27, season 3 the next spring after that. It could run up to 6 or 7 seasons depending on how they handle the unwritten novellas, but we'll get to that. But the point is, you see HBO openly saying this, that waiting for the streaming data wasn't working, we're going to batch renew The Pit, we're going to batch renew A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I pretty much already have renewed it, that they've already, when they're openly talking about filming the next ones back to back, I think it's just words on paper at this point. So there is cause to hope that everyone else realized how stupid this is. It doesn't work if Netflix can still make money because they're suggesting, oh, well, here's another one-season sci-fi show from Korea or from Germany or something, but it doesn't help build long-term franchises. And think of how many of their franchises have ended recently. The Crown, Stranger Things, which you can see when the shift happened on Stranger Things because Season 2 came out a year after Season 1. Then the third season was a 2-year wait by 2019. This is around the time that they got rid of their original content chief, who built up Netflix originals starting in 2013. I've talked about her before, Cindy Holland. Cindy Holland was good at her job. She really knew how to make these hit shows that were starting, like Stranger Things, Orange is the New Black. But then they ousted her by 2019, and you saw this shift that earlier than that, they were doing annual releases, but starting in the late 2010s, her influence was waning, and they'd built up so much confidence in the streaming algorithm that they said, we can wait 2 years for the data. That's more important than a regular schedule. Holland had worked in TV before she knew that was a bad idea, so they got rid of her. But everyone else in the scheduling community is realizing streaming should actually do some things like TV used to do, which are common sense. Unfortunately, because we're talking about things that they are planning and greenlighting right now, you obviously won't see the results of these reforms for another year, maybe two. That anything they batch redo right now won't physically be filmed until this summer and then through next year. So we're still going to have the season 2s of other things that were due for fall. They're not going to have season 3 by spring of next year. I understand that. Like with Dunk and Egg, that they said we pushed it to fall so it'll synchronize with 1 year after that. Fair enough. I know it's adjustment time. I understand that physically it takes time. Another thing which I will admit at the end of this, that I was wrong that you need 2 years to make a really big show. Even if it was perfect, the 2-year wait isn't worth doing that. Even if there weren't problems. I admit that even had we known this, it wouldn't have prevented these 2-year gaps on House of the Dragon specifically, due to certain unique factors. Back in 2022, before it aired, just put yourself in the mindset that the public was facing it with this unknown show. This was considered a dead franchise. Yeah, there were problems after season 2, but nothing on the level back then where it was treated with open contempt. You're trying to make another Game of Thrones show after what season 8 did? Now, the hardcore fans who've been following filming news and reports, we had cautious optimism that these look like good decisions they're making, and we were worried, but we weren't as surprised that they only renewed for season 2 the week after the first episode aired. I can't blame them for that. That when you're trying to resurrect a dead franchise, they had to see, would people even watch episode 1, was a not just valid, but major question. So thinking on it, it would have been insane to batch renew through season 2 before the first one even aired. It was it was a big gamble. So even had the whole, we're going to wait for the analytics thing been rejected that early, we still would have had a 2-year wait for season 2. I grudgingly, not that Orsi is doing other things right, saying we need to batch renew Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I don't blame her for that. This was such a controversial, we're going to try to make another Game of Thrones spinoff with House of the Dragon. Nor do I really blame them with the wait for season 3, because when would they have batch renewed for season 3? What was happening last year when they could have been filming for this year? The giant writer's strike. That just as the time where it was we're going to film this year to air next year after that, this giant once every 20 years writer's strike happened. So it would have been insane to renew then. Heck, at the time, the problem was even we can't do live rewrites during filming on season 2 in 2023, so I don't blame them for that. I do think that, and now here we are, 2025, filming for season 3. I think they should have tried to be filming in 2024, but with the strike disruption, that probably would have messed us up too. This is hopeful for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. As for House of the Dragon itself, I've said before, given that the financial situation at Warner is improving, never say never. I hope they get an episode extension to the 4th season. That they cut the episode count. I hope that we get a 14-episode season 4 split into 2 halves, which is functionally seasons 4 and 5, but aired only 1 year apart, 12 months. By way of direct comparison to The Last of Us, where what should have been one 12-episode season on this big game, they have turned into 2 seasons of 7 each. But my hope is they can make up for the episode count they lost. And from what we can tell, Season 3 didn't condense things to reach the same endpoint. They're ending a little earlier at a different battle, which is actually also a really good stopping point, the Battle of Tumbleton, instead of the Dragon Pit episode. That's fine. Just, we need a few more episodes to do this. It wouldn't be 2 more 10-episode seasons. Just, can ya do what Breaking Bad did, which Breaking Bad functionally had 6 seasons. A lot of shows did that, where the last season was supersized and aired in 2 halves, about 1 year apart as opposed to 2 years. Maybe, but that's House of the Dragon, that's speculative. At this point, I'm not even worried about that, but about future shows. Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a bit different because it's smaller scale, but if we ever get a big anthology like Targaryen Conquest through Jaehaerys, is what I keep talking about, where Season 1 is the Conquest, Season 2 is the Dornish War, through the time of Maegor the Cruel and the Faith Militant Uprising in Season 4, and it would end with Jaehaerys' family troubles, smaller scale, easier to make in Season 7, leading up to House of the Dragon. Like a 5 to 7 season show. I think Maegor would die at the end of Season 5. You would need to make such a show 1 season a year for 5 years, or 7 years, however long it runs. They need to do that again, because we've seen how 2-year gaps, the loss in momentum is not worth the streaming analytics. Because most people, when they see a 2-year-old show in their suggested views feed, no algorithm is perfect enough to make them want to watch it. They lose interest because it was 2 years old. Netflix never considered that. They thought the algorithm is so perfect that it'll pick something addiction-level interest in whoever we suggest it to. Well, no, it's old. So they're moving away from that. My thing is just, as an ongoing cinematic universe with prequels set in different eras, whenever there is a writer attached to Targaryen Conquest, Mattson Tomlin, his show, which hasn't even begun casting yet, they need to really plan that to be an annual release, which is a bit harder than saying it for Dunk and Egg, because I know it's a bigger scale. It's a bigger ask, because there's going to be dragons in it, there's going to be a lot of CGI. It hurts too much to do it the way they did. And I even forgive that House of the Dragon had its own unique issues, which we probably would have been getting a 2-year gap between seasons 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 anyway, which I hope they can fix by a supersized and split 4th and 5th season. But this was the answer to all the riddles of why are there 2-year gaps now? Well, there's so much more CGI. Why are you literally filming only every alternate year? Because they waited to greenlight it because they were waiting for the streaming analytics. The studios now realize how crazy that was. We are not, the age of these 2-year gaps is going to be over, thankfully. This is the learning curve that started the streaming boom and then going through the bust era of the boom and the strikes and everything and working out how the new streaming platforms should work. So I have cautious optimism that they learned their lesson. They're openly saying we're going to do it the right way now. It's just going to take a year or 2 to catch up because the things they're ordering now, like Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Seasons 2 and 3, will need to film before they can come out on an annual basis. So we are about to enter the filming era for exterior film spy photos filming era for House of the Dragon Season 3, now that it's June. Please like and subscribe as we get into that. In the lead up to that, I was going over all this state of the industry stuff for what Warner is doing. Now we get back to the core stuff of following spy reports. So please like and subscribe, because I'm not just wildly speculating, I'm trying to keep you informed about all of this.